The story of Galileo Galilei is one of the most well-trodden in the history of science. Born in 1564 in Pisa, he spent most of his life establishing and using the rules for modern empiricism and scientific analysis. His work on what we would now call physics was groundbreaking, studying everything from gravity to pendulums to acoustics. However, when it came to astronomy, he bit off a bit more than he could chew. Galileo observed heliocentrism, the Earth moving around the Sun, while the Catholic Church supported geocentrism, the opposite. They sicked the Inquisition on him, he allegedly gave a defiant one-liner while publicly retracting his theories, and spent the rest of his life under house arrest. It's the classic example of a do-gooder scientist on the side of truth, bravely sticking to his guns against a deluded world, and yet another example of that nefarious Catholic Church conspiring to keep Europe in the Dark Ages for some reason. The real story is actually a bit sillier. The first spanner in the works is that Galileo was wrong. About this, I mean. He was unmistakably a genius. A lot of the stuff he's credited for, he deserves. And given he's credited for all of modern science, that's a high accolade. The discovery of the phases of Venus in 1609 was good proof that celestial bodies orbited the Sun, not Earth. However, the then unknown phenomenon of diffraction caused Galileo to make wildly inaccurate measurements of the stars, follow the faulty maths to its conclusion, and it's incompatible with heliocentrism. Galileo himself probably knew this, and he himself thought he had more compelling evidence for his Copernican model. To him, the tides, rising and lowering, was bulletproof evidence of the Earth's movement, ideas he published in 1616. Which, again, it's not. It's because of the moon and gravity, which Galileo dismissed because gravity was a bit too mystical. Galileo knew that his own theory was inadequate. It could only explain one high tide per day, not two, but he stuck to his guns. Now, Galileo was a smart man, with many supporters, including then Pope Urban VIII. However, his views on heliocentrism were dangerous to the Church, as they pretty clearly contradicted a literal reading of the Bible. For what it's worth, this wasn't simple-minded theological stubbornness. The Protestant Reformation challenged the Holy See's legitimacy by openly disregarding the parts of the Bible that its authority stemmed from. The only way the Church could insist these parts were legitimate was to insist that the entire Bible was factually truthful. As a Catholic monarch's authority was divine in origin, showing a single part of the Bible was inaccurate threatened the stability of kingdoms, entire states, the whole balance of power in an increasingly unstable Western Europe. The Church's survival depended on defending every part of the Bible. Despite the fact Galileo held one of many matches that threatened this whole powder keg, Pope Urban paid Galileo in 1632 to publish a dialogue concerning two chief world systems. This wasn't a modern scientific paper, it was a dialogue, a story between two characters, each of whom had different opinions on the heliocentrism debate, meant to present both sides of the argument equally over almost 1,000 pages. In the Copernican corner was Salviati, espousing Galileo's tidal-heavy arguments for heliocentrism, which, again, were incorrect. In the Church's corner, Simplicio. It's a name that means exactly what you think. Now, Galileo probably didn't mean to laugh at the legitimacy of the Pope and half the states of Europe, but after 1632, his appointment with the Inquisition was almost inevitable. It is, accidentally, a story about truth against injustice, but it's also a story of stubbornness and desperately failing to read the room. And, in a world where the seemingly ill-informed are given as much amplitude as scientists, it's a very early example of how the pursuit for truth doesn't exist in a vacuum. Even the greatest scientists aren't infallible, and if people aren't willing to listen, it's worth first considering the reason why.